Hello and welcome to KegThat's YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be showing you how to bottle your beer, and we're going to be doing it through a process called bottle conditioning. And what that is you take your finished beer, you put a bit of sugar in it, and then you bottle the beer. Whilst the beer is in the bottle, the yeast which is already present in the beer will wake up, it will eat those sugars, and it will create carbon dioxide, and that will then dissolve back into the beer and create the carbonation that we want. Bottle conditioned beers are not pasteurized, so that means it's still a living thing, and over time it's going to change. This actually really suits multi-styles or styles which are quite yeast forward in their flavors, because these flavors tend to get better over time, flavors mellow out, and some people like to get bottle conditioned beers to age them. One style it may not suit so well are hoppy styles, and that's just because hop character tends to fade over time. However, there's nothing stopping you bottling hoppy beers, and I bottle IPAs a lot in this kind of way. You just may want to drink it quickly. So, something else you'll want to think about though is the amount of sugar that goes into the beer. I put a calculator below, which I'd strongly recommend you use. Calculate the amount of sugar that goes into the brew. The reason being is, of course, too little sugar and your beer won't be carbonated, or too much sugar and your beer will just be overcarbonated, or in some extreme cases, the bottle will explode. And I'm also going to show you some techniques that I do, which sort of create a more even carbonation throughout the beer. So the beer that I'm going to bottle today is a steam beer, and I've been cold crashing it for the past few days just to let all the sediment get drawn to the bottom of the fermenter, and it's now ready in my fermentation chamber to be bottled. I've made up a ChemSam solution in this spray bottle because everything that the beer touches now that it's done fermenting needs to be sanitized. So it's just very simple, as you can see, to spray the tap here because I'm about to take a sample. I've already taken a hydrometer reading, so I know that the beer has fully attenuated, but I'm also checking for things like any fermentation off flavours that are created by the yeast. I'm just making sure as well that I'm happy with the beer and it doesn't need any more conditioning. It's also fun just to have a bit of beer. I'm boiling the kettle so that there's boiling water, which will not only help dissolve the sugar, but it will also help sanitize it. It's helpful to do this as early on in the bottling process as possible, because it gives you a good opportunity to get the sugar solution into the beer and get it stirred in and evenly distributed. This will prevent too much sugar going into one bottle and creating overcarbonation. So I'm measuring out my sugar, and I got the measurement from the bottle carbonation calculator below, and it says to put in 133 grams. This is based on the temperature that the beer has been kept at, my preferred carbonation levels, and the volume of beer that I am carbonating. Often, beer isn't kept at one temperature. For example, you might ferment at 18 degrees and then do a cold crash at 4 degrees, so it's best to put in an average temperature of that time. So I'm pouring the boiling water over the sugar, and this is helping to sanitize it so it's safe to go in the beer, and just giving it a stir so it's nicely dissolved. Just making sure everything is sanitized, so I'm spraying the opening of my fermenter, and I'm also spraying the rim of the container with my sugar solution in it. Once I've finally got the lid off, I can pour the sugar solution in, and I'm just making sure not to splash it and not to pour it from too high, because we don't want to get oxygen into the beer. And then I seal the lid again. So I'm sanitizing my stirring spoon, which I'm going to put into the beer, and I'm going to stir in the sugar solution. I'm doing this very slowly because I don't want to introduce any oxygen unnecessarily into the beer. And I also don't want to disturb the trube, which is settled nicely on the bottom. I dry hop this batch, which is why there's quite a bit of hop matter on top, but after cold crashing, it usually all gets pulled to the bottom, or some of it might stay on top. But very little of it actually comes out into the beer, if any at all. I have used this as my primary fermenter, my secondary fermenter, and I'm bottling directly from it. And the reason being is that I know some brewers, they like to move their beer from the primary into secondary for dry hopping, and then from secondary into a separate vessel for a bottling bucket. However, my view is that each time you move the beer from one vessel to the next, you're actually increasing a couple of risks. One of the risks is oxidation, and that's basically introducing oxygen to the beer, which can start to create off flavors. Another risk is contamination. And every time you put the siphon in the beer or you move the beer into another vessel, you need to make sure that that's very well sanitized. You increase the risk of an infection every time that you introduce things to the beer or move the beer to another bucket. I like to keep it all in one bucket. I feel like the pros massively outweigh the cons. So you avoid oxidation, you avoid introducing things unnecessarily into the beer. And it can all be done in one bucket. So I dry hopped in here. I then cold crashed, and it pulled the majority of all the trub and all the hops down to the bottom onto a nice yeast cake. When you add the sugar solution, as you saw, like I did, just stir very gently, and you won't disturb the trub. The tap is above the yeast cake, above the trub layer, so you won't get that much into the bottles. You're going to need lots of bottles for this, especially if you've got a 23 litre batch, but you can reuse bottles, and I'd recommend washing them out as soon as you've emptied it. This is a bottle tree, and it's a really useful tool in homebrewing. It contains a reservoir on top which you can pour ChemSam solution into, and you can put the sanitized bottles onto the rack to dry. I'm filling mine with some ChemSam solution which has been pre-made, and it's looking a bit cloudy just because I'm in a hard water area and it tends to make the ChemSam solution go cloudy. The way the reservoir on top works is you push the bottle down onto the nozzle and it sprays Star San inside the bottle, therefore sanitizing it. It takes a few pumps to get sorted, but it then becomes very easy to use for the rest of the bottling day. And as you can see, I've put my bottle caps in there to sanitize as well. It takes a bit of time, but eventually you can sanitize enough bottles for your brew, and if you can get a friend to help you, that would be even better. So I've got this thing here, which is a bottling wand, and what it does is it fills the bottles from the bottom upwards, and that's really good because it will help prevent oxidation. This end here is spring loaded, and you just push the bottle onto there, and it will open and beer will flow into the bottle, and when you take the bottle off, it will close the flow. And the other end fits really snugly onto the tap of a plastic fermenter. Like everything else, before I use it, I just make sure it's nice and sanitized by spraying ChemSan into the inside of it and shaking it around, and then spraying it onto the outside as well. And after spraying the tap with ChemSan again, I just place the bottling wand onto the tap. Now the next stage is to fill the bottles, and it's as simple as pressing the bottle onto the bottling wand. It does create a mess, so it's best to do this in a kitchen or an area which is easy to clean up. Also, probably best not to wear your smartest clothes as you do this. On the first bottle or two, some trub will come out into the bottle, but the rest of the batch should be fairly clear. The bottling wand itself is a really good size, and actually it displaces the right amount of liquid, so it's best to fill it to the very brim of the bottle, and then when you pull the bottle out from the bottling wand, you'll notice that it levels off at the right part of the neck. Once the bottle is filled with beer, I then take a cap from the reservoir filled with ChemSam and I just place it to the side, and I fill in batches of about 10 to 12 or so. I use a lever arm capper, but you can use whatever capper you have available. I then cap the beers in these batches as well. If you have a friend who can help you out during this process, it will really make the time go quicker. Maybe you can promise them some beers once they're ready. When all the beer is finally in bottles and the bottles are all nicely sealed, I like to dry the lids and label the bottles with what the batch is, just so I can differentiate it from any other batches I have lying around or that will come in the future. This beer is called Mystery Hop because my friend gave me a bag of hops with the label fell off a long time ago, and so I'm just putting MH for Mystery Hop. The next stage is to wait. We're just waiting for the carbon dioxide to be produced by the yeast and to carbonate the beer. It's best to leave the beer at around 18 to 20 degrees, whether it's an ale or a lager.
The exception to this rule actually is Kvike yeast, where if you bottle condition it at its primary fermentation temperature, so that could be 35, sometimes even 40 degrees, the yeast will work just as quickly as it did during its primary fermentation, and your beer will be ready in a matter of a few days. With the vast majority of other yeast though, what happens is that it will take about 2 weeks to get ready. This is because there's another fermentation going on in the bottle, and so the yeast, whilst it will create that carbonation actually kind of quickly, sometimes it will be a matter of days as well, it's just it will kick off so many other fermentation off flavours that it just takes a bit of time to clean up. So we're actually about 2.5 weeks after I bottled this beer, and let's see what it's like. So there's a nice hiss, some nice carbonation there. There we go, it's looking very clear. The way to pour the beer is to pour it out, but as you can see I've left a small bit at the bottom. That's probably a bit too much actually. Reason being, it's going to have sediment in it, and you don't want the sediment to get into the glass, because as you can see this is nice and clear and the sediment will make it go hazy. It also helps to put it in the fridge for a couple of days before you serve it. That's how you bottle condition beers. Do let us know how you get on in the comments, and cheers. If you found this video useful, please do like, please do subscribe, and leave a comment to let us know how you got on. Thank you.